And we're live. We'll do a nice slow intro to let some folks trickle in here. Welcome to Currencycloud and Alpaca's LinkedIn Live event following the money embedded finance today and tomorrow. I think we are live. Yeah, we're live. Yoshi, good to see you. Our cameras are on. And as we get started here, we'll give a couple minutes as folks join these live events. It helps to wait a few minutes for folks to pop on and listen in. So today, we're going to be talking about the state of embedded finance. Yoshi is CEO of Alpaca. And I want to get Yoshi to do a more formal introduction of himself and Alpaca, the business. But just to set the context for the conversation today, Currencycloud and FXC Intelligence recently published a report on the state of embedded finance. And we're going to hear from Yoshi about his perspective as an industry leader and a leader of a company that is part of this wave of the rise of embedded finance. So just to start with a quick definition for folks so we all get on the same page. Quoted from the report, embedded finance describes when traditional financial processes are integrated into other environments or ecosystems, powered by banking as a service APIs from financial services providers or similar. The result is non-financial companies providing financial services that sit quietly in the background of other processes. So with that in mind, I think what we're going to be discussing today is the trend and what we can expect to see from Alpaca, as well as Yoshi's thoughts moving forward. So Yoshi, I think we're in a position now where we're ready to get into the meat of the conversation. Tell us a little bit about yourself and about Alpaca. We know that you founded Alpaca as an API first company, but not necessarily an embedded finance company. So maybe a little bit of a difference between APIs, embedded finance, and then what Alpaca is doing in the market today.
Sure. Thank you very much, Brady. And, thank you very much for having me. Firstly, Alpaca is an API first brokerage platform for fractional commission-free stock trading and also for the crypto trading. And, Brady, as you said, we started firstly as a truly purely API stock brokerage firm. And we initially targeted users, developers who want to trade programmatically through our API for that stock trading. And really, this became something that got much bigger, that went into the embedded finance. But I think we always saw the problem where the people cannot access to the financial services programmatically easily. So I think regardless of the format of API or the terminology of the embedded finance, I think both of them are really trying to figure out how to solve that problem, how the developers and the makers, builders can create easy solution to be able to embed and create new services using the financial services.
Yeah, it's interesting, pivot, and you guys have brokerage as a service. Just launched crypto as a service, being able to integrate to different fintech interfaces. And maybe I just narrowed your market a little bit by saying fintech interfaces. So could you also just give us a sense for the audience, where can consumers interact with Alpaca? Because they're not going to alpaca.com to trade, right?
Yes and no. People who can do the programmatic access using API, the individual can still use our service. And there are actually a bunch of the individual developers who's trading through our API. But I think what's important here is that there is a whole kind of macro trend of how the software evolved from really on-premises service that's really hardware box to the software. And then to the SaaS subscription, and then API. And I think how we see the trend of technology is the lighter, more flexibility, which creates cheaper solution, customizable solution. And so basically it becomes harder and harder for the infrastructure or platform like ourselves to be noticed by the end consumers because the shape of our product became very much flexible and embeddable. So that's customizable by the people who's building the experience to the end consumers. So I agree, it becomes even harder to kind of figure out what we do in the background.
So you've mentioned this long shift in technology from on-prem hardware, software, cloud-based computing, API. Um, what's driving this? Like what from where you sit, do you have an idea of why technology is moving in this direction?
Of course, I think like there's like few like big trends that we always have to think about. Like I think like technology evolves where the computation power just the Moore's law that it gets faster and faster, which creates like lighter and smaller. Therefore, we have an iPhone, and I think it's the same thing. When things got like stronger, the shape of the actual thing becomes much smaller, and the network became faster. So it creates like more flexible solution to be created, and I think that's the one trend here. And I think another trend that may be a part of the the like discussion points that we may talk about later is the also this evolution of the user experience of the for the individuals to interact with services. And I think because of the evolution of technology, the velocity of building new services became faster. So the velocity of new services coming up became really fast, right? I think it's coming from the Facebook to Twitter to Snapchat and now Clubhouse, and then this rise and fall of each of the consumer services became really fast compared to like 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So I think there's a trend here, and I think that embedded finance is really the result child of these trends for sure.
Yeah, and I want to come back to the customer experience point you just touched on. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. We're going to drop some report insights from the report across the screen here, and curious to get your thoughts, Yoshi, as we go through and talk about some of these key data points. So, first, the report mentions 67% of industry experts agreed that the lack of supporting technologies and services is the biggest barrier to the successful adoption of embedded finance. Um, do you agree with this? Do you disagree? What are some of the barriers still in the way of true adoption of embedded finance?
I definitely agree. And then the technology, I think it's really lack of how it was built for. Because like when you think about most of the financial services, especially like infrastructure product like ours, most of the companies has been built probably like in 30 or even 50 years ago, and the system that's have been built is of course like using the very similar services, and it's very difficult to change and upgrade because of the sensitivity and the criticalness of the what we do. Therefore, when we think about like 30, 50 years ago, how the technology was in terms of the big trend, it was of course on premises. And the whole like stack and how we develop, how they used to develop the things is very legacy, and it's not agile, and therefore it's not flexible. And therefore, I think the industry experts are saying that it's come from that lack of supporting technologies and services. And this word of supporting technology and services can go beyond a lot of scope why it is so.
And I think when we think of financial technology, it's a different mindset than your typical Facebook move fast and break things. Because if you break a financial service, people's money's gone. That doesn't make them too happy. So I think what you might be touching on as well is we rely on these legacy systems, and it's really hard to just rip them out and replace them because you have to still function. You can't miss a day of payments. You can't miss a day of stock trading. So that there's that whole element there as well. Do you have a perspective on the rise of newcomers versus incumbents being able to adapt? Where do you see things going? And feel free to hone in specifically on Invest-Tech or Wealthtech as well.
Definitely, like I focus on talking about Invest-Tech and Wealthtech because of our scope. But I think like there are two things that continue to exist that's not going to change regardless of the technology trend, when we think about embedded finance. And one thing is, of course, the regulation. There's a bunch of the regulatory framework that require us to answer to the auditing, reporting, and those things. That's not going to change. And actually, I think that's going to be more adapted into the fast-moving companies, new coming companies like ours, to make sure that we are compliant. And it is extremely important because the compliance and regulation were built and born in order to prevent certain bad things from happening. And learning about the history of the compliance and regulation gives us a lot of clue why it's important. And the second thing that's not going to change, in my opinion, is that even though we create new systems and the new interface, which is basically API instead of SaaS subscription or software, is that we do connect with the existing legacy ecosystem. Regardless of what you build, everything proprietary, you still connect with external parties. There's exchanges that's been there, which means like market data come from there. And if you think about banking, even though you create a new bank, you still have to work with the existing ecosystem of ACH or Wire or Swift network. So that do not change. So I think we continue to deal with these two things on the back end, which consumers or the service buyers may not see. But I think like embedded finance players will need to continue to handle these two things very carefully to make sure that things work correctly.
Yeah, yeah. It makes a ton of sense, and possibly the reason why embedded finance is still has ways to go. So we're gonna move ahead in the report and pull out a quote from Currencycloud's Todd Latham, who's our chief marketing officer, and he said that embedded finance makes it much easier to scale financial businesses, resulting in a really rich, diverse ecosystem of niche players who are often sharing the infrastructure. So, can you just touch on that, Yoshi? I think there's two key elements here. Number one, there are market players out there trying to attract the same customer, but they're relying on the same infrastructure provider, same vendors. If you have comments on that. And then, the second point to pull out is from your perspective, as he mentioned, it's easier to scale a financial business. So if you have thoughts on how Alpaca views that and the ability for you to scale your customer base.
Sure. In terms of the relying on the similar partners, what we can always think about in terms of embedded finance is this AWS context. So there's a platform so that like many apps and companies can rely on the certain platform and cloud instead of creating some on-premise server system company by company. So I think that basically allowed for the companies and apps to go faster without worrying about these. That's basically what's happening for this embedded finance. So we're trying to take out the very complex compliance and regulatory stuff and a lot of reporting things into the package so that people can outsource it in a way that they do for the cloud services like AWS. So that's one thing. And the second thing about the companies can scale much faster by being embedded finance, I definitely agree because you can focus on the user experience. At the end of the day, financial services is really for every single person. We live as a human and we deal with money in the capitalism, which means we have to deal with financial services, and that's for everyone. Therefore, people have to really care for how each of the user thinks about the services, which comes down to the user experience. And the thinking about and really worrying about user experience is a very, very different mindset and part of the brain that we have to worry about, like how we make this whole system stable, and then making sure that we are doing the compliant reporting. So I think I completely agree with those 2 points.
Yeah, and you mentioned the customer experience. I think it's a nice segue to our third insight here, which is that 80% of our industry experts agree that embedded finance will help consumers interact more frequently, but spend less time interacting with and experiencing finance. And I think it's a often quoted idea that nobody wants a mortgage, nobody wants a student loan, they want a house and they want to go to college, right? So, you know, I guess how do we separate these financial products that people expect that they need and they talk about going to get a mortgage, but if you take a step back, you know, it's really about getting them a house. So taking that step back, curious if you have thoughts on that, how you envision these brands, these consumer endpoints will deliver services that might completely change the way we talk about, in Alpaca's case, investing in the stock market.
Going from the getting the mortgage to the just wanting to have a house, we can go step even further. You actually want the house for certain years when you are living in that city. So I think the whole experience of our life has becoming even more portable and then becoming micro. And this is also that's exactly consistent with the same trend of the software technology evolution from the on-premises software SaaS to the API, because the services that you can use and the components that you can get from the services became smaller and smaller, and the becoming bits and bytes instead of the whole chunk of it, which basically represented by the concept of the mortgage. You're stuck with the 30 years, basically the loans that you have to deal with. And so I think that's the same thing. And it's the same thing for the attention span of ourselves, right? The experts saying that the consumers interacting more frequently but spend less time. That's exactly that. And I don't think this is only about financial services. I think it's just really the how we are as a human and how the society is. And I think I see no difference in terms of the financial services. Same thing as Snapchat, Facebook, or TikTok. We look at it frequently, but like we don't spend too much time every time. So that same thing. And I think that really represents and shows that financial services has truly became the one of the software services. Like always, like Mark Anderson has been saying, software eats the world, and just has been eating up the concept of the financial services as well. And the embedded finance really represents and proves that it has eaten the financial services too.
So it sounds like you've thought through the customer experience quite a bit. And it's interesting because you at Alpaca are sitting in a position where ideally the customers don't know Alpaca necessarily is providing the services. You're going to market through partners and brands that are delivering that to the customer. So can you talk a little bit about how you think about customer experience at Alpaca, knowing that your client or partner might actually have a bigger impact on customer experience? How do you work with them to make sure that it's that Alpaca's customers are still delighted?
Sure. There's two components that we care about when thinking about customer experience. Our customer, again, we focus on developers, and that's how API companies should be, like Stripe did or Twilio or Plaid did. Therefore, for us, customer experience means developer experience. And developer experience means the richness of the API and how we can continue to contribute to the open source and the developer community. So that's how we care about our customer experience on as an API companies. If we think about as a second component of the customer experience of the end user experience, what we really try to contribute there is how we can create the API component and the capability so that app layer services can just utilize that without building something new or inventing something new. And the customer experience comes with of course, the quality of the service. Of course, it comes with the stability. It comes with the speed of the basically like when the trace goes through or the reaction comes through, and also the certain features that just need to get built by the infrastructure like ours, because there's a movement of the money within the books and records and journaling, and that has to be taken care of us. So those are the really things that we are building as an infrastructure. So we really do care about the end user customer experience because we have to build the tools to enable those features that creates a better end user customer experience.
Yeah, and what you're getting at too is the level of trust really that you have in your client, where you're taking the approach, we're going to build out the best toolbox that can exist for our clients. And then you trust that they're going to deliver that in a way that they know their customers are expecting and will be happy with. So I as we start to wrap up the conversation, I think we talk about this a few times before, Yoshi, but I want to get your thoughts on the future opportunities for embedded finance and where you see Alpaca fitting in the world of embedded finance and in general as your company strategy.
Sure. As a company, we always believe that again, like money is every people's life. Therefore, it has to be extremely cultured and customized and personalized. And in order to do that, each of the apps and the services layer have to understand the very deep context. And we are, humble, and we know that we don't know everything. And it really comes down from my own experience coming originally from Japan and spending time in the US and different countries. Each of the people have different emotion and the different relationships to the money and the finance. Therefore, financial services has to be adapting for each of the local components and context. And so, which said, there are a lot of ways to go, and there's so much ahead, because look around the world, and the most of the countries or just don't have access yet to the simple investing or simple banking or simple lending products at all. So in order to do that, we as an infrastructure companies have to work much harder to make sure that those services that can be localized and adapted to the best to the end users can be built much faster, much cheaper, and with the much more innovation. So there are just really a lot of ways to go, and they just started it, in my opinion.
Yoshi, good speaking with you as always. Where can folks find out more about Alpaca?
Yes, so our company's website is alpaca.markets, and we are pretty active on Twitter as Alpaca HQ. So if you can type in on the Google Alpaca space trading or Alpaca space API, we should come up at the top. I'm pretty active and responsive on Twitter, so please do hit me up if you have any questions.
Yep. Yeah, go check out Alpaca. I believe we've linked the embedded finance report published by Currencycloud and FXC Intelligence in the comments. So please go download the report, check it out. And thank you all for joining. Yoshi, it's a pleasure as always, and I have no idea what time it is in Japan, but hopefully this wasn't too disruptive to your sleep schedule.
No, it's great. Thank you very much for having me, Brady. It's been always fun talking with you. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.